All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphones when you are not speaking and to minimize any background noise. Please also turn your camera on if you would. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. Assemblywoman Black.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Krasner.
Here.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman Orentlicker.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters. Oh, not sure the order. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas. Here. Assemblywoman Titus. Chair Wynn.
Thank you. Please note, I did see Assemblywoman Titus online. I don't see her actively right now, but if it looks like we have both members, Assemblywoman Titus and Assemblyman Hafen, coming in. Please mark them present if you would. And then mark other members present as they arrive if you would. Chair Wynn is currently presenting in another committee, so I will be chairing the committee today. I would like to thank all the folks who are in the room and online who are here to present and or comment on the agenda items for today. We have 3 bill hearings on the schedule for today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started with our first bill. I would like to make, agenda items may be taken in a different order than listed. 2 or more agenda items may be combined for consideration. All individuals present in our meeting room, please always keep your face covering on and maintain social distancing. This in-person and online meeting format helps to keep everyone safe during COVID-19 pandemic. Members of the public may provide testimony in a variety of ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. You can provide public comment by registering to participate by phone or in person on the Nevada Electronic Legislative Information System, or NELIS, on our legislative website. And you are welcome to send your comments to the Assembly Health and Human Services email, which is asmhhs@asm.state.nv.us. We may ask you for documentation to support your testimony, and if you would provide that to the committee secretary, that would be helpful, so all of our committee members may receive that. Anyone who would like to receive electronic notification and access to the committee's agenda, minutes, and final reports can do so by signing up on NELIS. You may also submit public comment in writing, either in addition to testifying or in lieu thereof. Written public comment may be submitted before, during, or up to 48 hours after the meeting adjournment. And finally, please put your electronic devices, especially cell phones and laptops, on silent mode during the meeting. With that, we will move on to our first agenda item. As I said, we have 3 bill hearings this afternoon, and we have allocated equal time for testimony and support, opposition, and neutral after the bill introductions. To be specific, each person providing testimony is allowed to speak for a maximum of 2 minutes. Staff will be timing each speaker to ensure everyone is given a fair opportunity to speak. We will limit the overall length of each testimony period to 20 minutes. We will start with a hearing on Senate Bill 188, which establishes programs for certain persons of low income and persons in foster care. Welcome, Senator Spearman. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair Peters. For the record, I am Pat Spearman, and I represent Senate District 1 in Clark County, and I'm here to present Senate Bill 188 for your consideration. According to Prosperity Now, nearly 13% of households in Nevada have income below the federal poverty level, which is $12,880 for an individual and $26,500 for a family of 4 in 2021. In addition, credit and debt are significant problems. Nearly 1 in 3 consumers with credit and credit card debt borrows more than 75% of his or her total credit card limit. And 1 in 4 Nevadans have an account in collections. Fewer than 1 in 2 consumers, 47% in the state, have prime credit. Such credit and debt issues can lead to other harmful financial decisions, such as relying too heavily on alternative, often predatory financial products. Approximately 1 in 4 Nevada households is considered underbanked. That means that despite having a checking or savings account, they rely on non-bank alternative financial services like check cashers, payday lenders, or pawn shops to make ends meet. Senate Bill 188 aims to help low-income Nevadans accumulate assets, become more financially literate, and achieve specific financial goals. The legislation seeks to bring hope and opportunity to low-income Nevadans by creating the Individual Development Account, or IDA, program. Qualifying residents will be able to save and grow their money through matching funds to enhance their financial security. The IDA program will provide those who need help most an opportunity to save money to go toward post-secondary education, starting a new business, buying a home, or investing in various other categories. Enhanced financial capabilities will enable IDA participants to improve their overall financial well-being and build a foundation for continued economic success, and realize a new level of security to fall back on in difficult times. Here's a summary of the bill. At a high level, the bill provides for the establishment of the IDA programs in Nevada. The program is based on similar initiative in Oregon. Sections 15 through 25 require the Office of the State Treasurer to solicit gifts, grants, and donations to carry out the program and establish the program if sufficient money is obtained. Section 20 authorizes the Office of the Treasurer to select 1 or more fiduciary organizations to administer the money in the program and to distribute a portion of the money to the Department of Health and Human Services foster care licensing agencies and housing authorities to provide instruction in financial literacy to account holders. If the program is established, Section 21 provides qualifying criteria to be an account holder. Specifically, a person must be a resident of Nevada, 12 years of age or older, a tenant of housing project in the state, a Medicaid recipient, or foster care provider who creates an account for a child in his or her care. The bill helps account holders balance grow because for every dollar deposited by the account, the fiduciary organization deposits up to $5 in matching funds and up to $3,000 in any 12-month period. Sections 2, 36, and 38 prohibit Medicaid, local housing authorities, and the Nevada Rural Housing Authority, respectively, from considering money deposited into an IDA to be income when determining a person's eligibility for the respective programs. Sections 5 through 14 of the bill create the Nevada Statewide Council on Financial Independence. The council is responsible for developing statewide priorities and strategies to help people who receive public assistance or social services to increase their financial independence, coordinating with certain state agencies and overseeing the IDA program if it is established. Finally, Section 33 requires the state treasurer to ensure that instruction and training in business opportunities and any benefits available to certain business enterprises are provided to tenants or local housing authorities, the Nevada Rural Housing Authority, and certain nonprofit organizations. To help the treasurer accomplish these goals, SB 188 in Section 32 authorizes the Office of the State Treasurer to appoint and employ a Deputy of Financial Literacy and Security. Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee, this is a bill that is really designed to help people who are currently receiving social services to lift themselves up out of poverty. Currently, people who are receiving SNAP and other benefits, there's a certain threshold. Many can't have a bank account their car has to be under a certain age. The bill also addresses the financial insecurity of those who are coming out of the foster care system. Right now, when someone ages out at age 18, 1 minute after midnight, they're no longer in the system. What this bill is designed to do is to provide for them as well an IDA that will help them or someone who wants to help them deposit money into this account. And so when they age out of the system, they have some money. They can get an apartment, they can go to community college, they can go to four-year college, they can go to trade or technical training, all of those things. The people that this bill is designed to help are people right now who want to do better in their lives and for their families. But the way the system is constructed, it is not designed for them to get out. It really is designed to keep them in and perpetuate poverty. Now, I hear people a lot of times saying things about those who are on, quote, welfare, and I hate to use that term, but low-wealth individuals who are in need of some type of social service. And many times you will hear people like us begrudge them and say things like, oh, well, they don't want to do this or they don't want to do that, and they should do. Well, this bill is designed to help them do exactly what people say, quote, they should do. If people want to buy a house, difficult to save when you can't have a savings account. This bill will allow them to do this. If you want to start a small business, but you can't have a savings account, difficult to do. This bill will help them do that. In short, this bill is really designed to fill the gaps for people who are in low-wealth communities and who find themselves in a situation where they need help. And I'll say this in closing. I have Mr. Eric Jimenez, who's here to help to co-present from the Treasurer's Office. Your positive consideration for this bill means that those Nevadans who want to lift themselves up, and many times you will hear lift themselves up by the bootstraps, and the people that they're talking about don't even have boots. So what this bill is designed to do is to help them do that. It is a fiscally responsible and fiscally sound way to help our brothers and sisters who need the help. I'm a Christian, and so I read the Bible as part of my daily meditation. And I do know that the person that I follow, the carpenter, said these words: "What you have done to the least of these, you have done it unto me." Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And if it's possible, I'd like to let Mr. Jimenez come and present, and then we'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, Mr. Jimenez, please feel free to play musical chairs and make around.
Thank you, Vice Chair. It's so nice to be here in front of you today. For the record, I'm Eric Jimenez, and I'm here on behalf of the Treasurer's Office. I think Senator Spearman did a really good job mentioning this in her testimony, but individual development accounts, or IDAs, are matched savings accounts that allow residents with lower incomes to save for a defined goal without losing access to essential programs like Medicaid and housing services. Throughout the country, IDAs have helped to increase the financial literacy and management skills for people in disadvantaged communities, while also helping them build pathways out of poverty. We know that in the 42 states that have programs like this around the country, participants are 35% more likely to own a home, twice as likely to attend an institution of higher learning, whether that be a 2-year, 4-year, or a trade school, and 84% more likely to start their own business. In the Treasurer's Office, we currently manage the Nevada Able Savings Program, which allows people who are differently abled to save money without losing access to much-needed benefit programs. This program that we operate, the ABLE program, is literally life-changing for people when we set up accounts for them. When people know that they can save for a defined goal and not lose access to their benefits, possibilities are really endless for them. SB 188 would further the impactful work that our office is engaged in every single day by helping marginalized communities gain access to the financial vehicles they need to advance their economic mobility. In his State of the State address, Governor Sisolak emphasized the importance that increasing Nevada's share of federal grant funding will play in our economic recovery. By directing our office to work collaboratively with other agencies, including DHHS, we can identify sources of grant funding that are going to be necessary to ensure that these low-income residents have the tools they need to be a part of that recovery. In addition to bringing more federal dollars back home to Nevada, we can also work to stand up a vital savings option for tenants of low-income housing, Medicaid recipients, and foster youth across the state. IDAs have proven themselves to be a valuable tool for people who are looking to buy a home, pursue higher education, or even start their own business. Similarly, by ensuring that these individuals don't lose access to these benefit programs, we can provide pathways out of poverty while still maintaining that vital social safety net. I want to thank my friend from Senate District 1 for her tireless efforts, along with the Southern Nevada Legal Aid Center and the Nevada Bankers Association for working on this bill with us. It's been about 2 years in the making, but we're really, really excited. So with that, do we have anyone else? We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Assemblywoman Black.
Thank you both for the presentation. I think this is an interesting program and I like the concept. But it seems like if you want to help people lift themselves out of poverty, you'd want to start as soon as possible, obviously, I think, in my opinion. So why restrict this only to post-secondary and not K through 12?
Well, thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. It's not restricted to post-secondary. We're talking about foster care children. K through 12, their education is taken care of. Once they age out of the foster care system, that's when they need help.
Follow up? So I feel like these disadvantaged children would be served greatly from being able to go through a private K through 12. You don't see any positive benefit to that?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Black. I guess I'm a bit confused because if you're in foster care, then your needs are taken care of, and if you are in a foster care home, there's a check that comes to help pay for your needs. And if you're in the system, then your educational needs are taken care of. When we say in this bill, 2-year, 4-year, or trade or technical school, we are identifying a problem that exists for those who have spent either their whole life or the majority of their lifetime in the foster care system. Once they age out, they have nothing. And so we're not ignoring K through 12. Their needs are taken care of. Those who are 18 and above, they're the ones that need the help, and that's why this bill addresses 2-year, 4-year trade or technical.
I understand what you're saying. It just seems to me like if you maybe struggled in K through 12, which I know a lot of these school districts are struggling and the children that are coming out of them are struggling, it's going to be hard to get them into a trade school or a college. So to me, it just seems like you'd want to give them a jump start earlier on than in college. But just a question.
Thank you. And Vice Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Black. Some of my colleagues are meeting in room 2134 right now on the second floor to try to address those needs. Again, when people age out of the system, they need financial security. That's why we've been specific to say 2-year, 4-year trade or technical. Again, this does not ignore K through 12. That is a group whose needs are currently being taken care of by public education. The ones that we're concerned with right now, once they're 18, their needs are not taken care of. This bill is designed, again, to take care, help them have financial stability if they want to go to college, a trade or technical school, they can do this. So I'm not sure why you're asking about K through 12 when their needs are taken care of, and we're talking about foster care children who age out of the system. So maybe I don't understand your question.
I'm asking because our kids are some of the lowest ranked in the nation. And it's hard to.
Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt here because I think we're talking about two different issues. One that's being dealt with by a couple of other bills, and one that we have presented today. And I do think that all of us are here to ensure that our students are getting the best education that they can wherever they end up. But that's a different issue than what we're talking about today. So I'm gonna move on. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Vice Chair Peters, and thank you, Senator Spearman, for bringing this very thoughtful legislation. And Mr. Jimenez, it's good to hear that we have support from the governor's office on something like this. Excuse my ignorance, but could you tell me the difference between what this bill will do and what the ABLE program does?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Erica Menace, for the record. So what this bill is trying to do, Assemblywoman, is essentially create a similar type of structure that is currently available for people with disabilities, having the ability to save without losing access to benefits, providing a similar program for Medicaid recipients, tenants of low-income housing, and foster youth. So the goals here are pretty similar. Where this would differ, and I think we're trying to do something with a bill that you all passed, AB 62, this would require a match in that. So if funding were made available for this program through outside sources, every dollar that a Medicaid recipient, a tenant of low-income housing, or a foster youth saved would be increased, so their savings would go further.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Madam Chair, may I follow up? Thank you. So I will guess that with the ABLE program, you already have a group of nonprofits or organizations that help with that program. Are you looking to have those same folks help with this program, or are you looking to broaden that and have other organizations, if there are any, help you to manage? Because one of the things that I found very interesting when I read it is the financial literacy portion. And when the senator speaks about people being non-bank services, we know how detrimental that can be in poor and underserved communities. And I find that extremely helpful. And I know I'm making a statement, but I do have a question. I did ask it first. One of the things that I think many of us forget is that these things are taught. We don't learn these things in the air. Personal financial literacy is not something that we just pick up on the sidewalk. We have to be taught. And I think that that is so critical. And I'd love to know if you have any organizations identified already, and what the structure of that education you plan for it to look like.
I think that is an exceptional question, Assemblywoman Erica Menace, for the record. One, to answer the first part of your question, I think this is a different program, and it's going to require kind of an all-hands-on-deck approach. That's why I think the section establishing the Council on Financial Independence is so important. There are sections of the bills that reference a fiduciary organization. That would be a nonprofit that would be selected, so they would differ from the types of organizations that we deal with on the ABLE side. So that's to answer the first part of your question. The second piece, and I think the Senator might have something to add here too, the financial literacy is going to be a key component in making sure these folks have access to all the tools they need to save. And I think, to go back to Assemblywoman Black's question, that's why in Section 21, subsection 2 of the bill, somebody who is 12 years of age and older can qualify for this account. So the goal here is not only are you saving, but are you having access to the financial literacy services that exist to make sure that you're maximizing your ability to do so. I don't think that the curriculum for that has been determined. I think a lot of that will rest with the Council on Financial Independence, but any suggestions that you have on what that may need to look like, we're happy to make that happen.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I have Assemblyman Matthews next.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Senator. Mr. Jimenez, thank you for the presentation. I think this was somewhat covered by what Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong just asked. I was going to ask about Section 25, Sub 1, where it spells out the responsibilities of the fiduciary organization, including providing that instruction on financial literacy. And I was going to ask, number one was going to be what we imagine the scope of that instruction would be. And then number two, how we will ensure that the fiduciary organizations are qualified to provide that type of instruction. So I don't know if you want to flesh that out a little bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't have a great answer for your question, Assemblyman Eric Jimenez, for the record. I think the types of financial literacy may differ based on the population being served. We thought it was very important when we started to craft this bill to make sure it was as broad as possible to ensure that if we had buckets of funding that came in, we could help serve defined groups. So right now there's federal funding for IDA programs for Medicaid recipients who are also refugees. There are buckets of funding available for tenants of low-income housing, for foster youth. So I think the financial literacy curriculum is going to depend on what type of population is being served, and that may be a different fiduciary organization for each of those populations. We don't know. I do think it is important. We worked with Senator Kiekefer in the last Committee on Health and Human Services to kind of flesh out the roles and responsibilities of that. We're primarily concerned with making sure that there are enough assets in the accounts in the trust, essentially, to make sure you could cover the matching funds. But I think also part of that would be a thorough vetting by the Treasurer's Office and then bringing it to the Council on what that financial literacy curriculum looks like.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and if I can just add one thing, that's not going to be codified in the statute. What we want to do is the Financial Literacy Council to look at the population, as Mr. Jimenez says, what do they need? The population over here may need more information on housing. Someone who's trying to start a small business may need more information on that. And so we're providing the template, and everything inside is fluid.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. I have Assemblywoman Teresa Benitez Thompson, please.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I have questions. I have a couple of Medicaid questions and then some questions just about how the accounts would operate and then work and be managed. So I think I heard you mention that there are special programs where refugees, it sounds like, can do savings, and then that income isn't reflected as income they have to report for the loss of benefits from Medicaid. So it sounds like there's kind of a footpath for this, but I guess I wanted to hear a little bit more about what portion of income are we going to kind of disregard or not count in terms of eligibility for Medicaid?
So Eric Jimenez for the record, and I think if we need to, we can get HHS in here to verify this, but the assets in the account and including the matching would not go against someone's Medicaid eligibility here. Assemblywoman, there are some federal statutes governing individual development accounts. This bill is modeled after that, so we're not trying to go above and beyond what's allowable under federal law currently.
Okay, so it would be then on that asset portion, not all assets, but specific to if they had this particular type of savings account, so not other kinds of savings account, it would have to be specifically this IDA savings account, then that's the piece that federally Medicaid doesn't have to count when they're looking at your eligibility or your ongoing eligibility.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Senator Pat Spearman for the record. Here's an illustration. Someone is in public housing, and the ceiling for their income is $500. What this bill does, it doesn't even consider that. It is separate and apart. And if they have $5,000 in their account, they cannot count that against their eligibility. So the account is for them to be able to save, to pull themselves up and out, and in the housing organizations that they are a part of, or Medicaid, they don't even consider that. this doesn't even exist as far as eligibility concerns. And we wanted to do it that way because if we don't, there's a disincentive to save, because many of the social services that you need, just like those who are differently abled, if you make 2 cents above that and you lose that, you have no safety net.
Yeah, it's an absolute poverty line, is what we
Exactly.
call it, that
Exactly.
FPL, it's an absolute poverty line, yeah. So I guess because I want to make sure that we have, there's, whenever we talk about Medicaid and whenever we talk about those programs, there's so much that a state can do and then so much that the federals allow us to do. So I'm just trying to I'm trying to see what that federal path is that we have to walk. So they just have to specifically have the IDA, and then the IDA can be funded at any amount. There's no cap on it where it triggers a piece in which it has to become a countable asset. It can be any amount, it sounds like.
We have, I believe we have Miss Finney with the Medicaid on the Zoom if she is available and able to answer this question, maybe. Hi, Miss Finney.
Hello.
Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I will point out that Medicaid eligibility is actually managed by the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services, and they have a whole branch that is, in fact, experts on this. It is my understanding that this bill was created to work within those federal regulations that are in existence, but I'd be happy to contact our partners that handle our eligibility and get them on the line if that's helpful to you.
Thank you. I actually am looking at my list, and it looks like I have a Mr. Deshawn with children's safety and welfare policy. Would you be available and willing to answer the question? Oh, they said they would be in the room, and I do not see them.
And Madam Chairwoman, because these are more technical questions on Medicaid, so if someone from the Department of Health and Welfare Services becomes available, I can wait to ask them. Because I had some questions like, do we need to ask it on the application? And then if it's asked, is it just, they might have to indicate that they have it, but would they need to disclose an amount or not? Or would they just double check it on the back end system with the treasurers? Just having, as a licensed social worker, having sat with people getting through that, 16 to 20 page medication application and knowing all of the stuff that they ask you about, and then income that can be counted or not counted, it's a tricky equation. So I just had questions about how that might look on the front end. But I have other questions about the board that I could probably ask the bill sponsor for legislative intent.
Yes, please go
Okay,
ahead.
perfect, thanks. All right, so on the board, I think I've got it right. So 11 members, correct? And there were some of the members, board compositions are always fascinating to me, as you know, Senator. So I guess talk to me a little bit more about, I was wondering, having the Attorney General on the board, how you see the attendance by the Attorney General or their designee playing out in this conversation.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Through you to Assemblywoman Benitez Thomas. So each person who is identified as recommended being on the board is for a specific reason. Where the Attorney General comes in is with respect to some of the legalities that will take place. And so we want to make sure that we have the best and brightest.
Okay, thank you so much. The other one seemed obvious. You've got Go It on there, I imagine, for industry and workforce perspective, although I imagine that if it were anyone with industry and workforce perspective, you'd be happy. Department of Education is on there as a board member. And then when you go into the 5 additional appointees that the treasurer gets to appoint, I think, am I reading it, that the first 3 you have there, the nonprofit housing or the rural housing or the reference to NRS 315, the goal is just someone from the housing, low income or public housing program. That's what you're getting at. You don't necessarily have a preference for one of those 3 as long as it is one of those 3.
That's correct. I'm sorry. Senator Pat Spearman, Senate District 1 through you, Vice Chair. That is correct.
Okay.
And if I can just say this, as we thought about this, it was really a matter of who needs to be in the universe to make sure not only the program is successful, but we want the participants to be successful as well.
Perfect. And then this last question is for the treasurer's office, just because having, talking about all these funds, saving funds that we create and set up, there's always the conversation about when does it become solvent? And I guess since these are individual accounts, I guess at what point can an individual make withdrawals from the account? Typically, these dollars are leveraged for investments. And so I don't have an idea of how fluid or not these are going to be, or whether or not there's the time frame for them to access the account. And then when they access them, allowable usages. Typically when we see ABLE accounts or when we say prepaid or 529s, those type of savings account come along with very specific usages for withdrawals. So if you could tell us, give us an idea of what those look like on the record.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Erica Jimenez, for the record. I think it's important to note how these ones differ a little bit from ABLE accounts. So when someone goes to a fiduciary organization and says, I want to set up an individual development account, when they set one up, it's for a defined goal. So that either tenant of low-income housing or Medicaid recipient or foster youth would have to say, I'm saving for a car, or I want to buy a house, or I want to start a small business. So that's where the fiduciary kind of comes into play, and also offering financial literacy services. So the account is not designed to just exist in perpetuity. Obviously, anything that's saved by a person with an account while they're still eligible for these benefits, they're able to be used. But the goal here is to have them save for a defined goal and then kind of have a pathway out. So I think it differs per account, and I think the board can kind of flesh out a lot of these details. In terms of the float and I think the assets on it, I don't really know how much we expect at first for assets to come in, so I can tell you it's not our position here to be using this as a tool to try to gain a lot of investment returns. The real key, I think, is making sure that people have the tools necessary to save. So from a cash flow perspective, I think we would want them to save, find defined goals, and have money in, money out very quickly.
A follow-up, if I could. So let's say if they said, so a house is kind of a bigger long-term commitment, so that would be the education with the person that, okay, if we start down this path, you can't turn around and pull out the savings in a month or in 2 months. You keep marching down this path until that goal is realized. If that goal isn't realized, then would there be a date in which the person could pull their investments out or their savings out?
I think that's a great question, Assemblywoman Erica Jimenez, for the record. I think that's the intent for them to be flexible, which I think there's another section in the bill which is escaping me right now, which designates the eligible uses, and you know how ABLE accounts have very specific uses that they can be used for. There is a list that can be used for here, so housing costs, that includes rental costs, so maybe you're trying to move into a bigger apartment and you need to try to get some savings so you can do that on a monthly basis. It could be transportation, a car, it could be some sort of piece of technology that will enable you to work from home, or higher education costs. So I think the intent here would be, let's say some unforeseen circumstance happened, how can the fiduciary organization and the nonprofit work with that account holder to make sure that they could find a use for those dollars?
I appreciate that. And I think that's section 22, because that's the one that I'm in. And so really it would be up to that individual and their fiduciary manager to define out more specifically what it means under each one of these in terms of allowable uses. Like, and I think for some of the more short-term uses like rent, that's where, people could pull out money quickly, right? I've saved up for a year, COVID hits, and now I need help with supplementing my rent. But let's say that they defined it as saving for a house. I was wondering about the ability for them to pivot with those savings to say, well, that's kind of off. That's, could I change my plan from saving for a house to rental assistance? And I guess the flexibility if the account lets them do that, or no, like when, let's say like 529 counts, right? What you set up and what you put in is for one purpose and one purpose only, and you're not, pivoting to different types of uses is harder to do. So I was trying to gauge that out on the record.
Yeah, no, and I'm super glad we're clarifying this for the record because I think it's helpful. Eric Jimenez for the record. I think the intent here, Assemblywoman, and if you disagree, let me know, but I think the intent here is to be flexible because unforeseen circumstances happen. The intent of this is not to operate like a tax-advantaged 529 account, right? There are reasons that is inflexible because it's in the tax code. For this, I think, if it's a reasonable expense and that account holder is working with their provider and is doing the financial literacy, they should be able to use that for a different goal. And maybe their goals change, right? Maybe when they got into it and they started saving, they may have thought they needed one thing, but in reality they needed a new car to get a new job. And I think it's important that we kind of meet them where they are. I think this is important because we're just setting up the structure to allow that to happen.
If I may, Madam Vice Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Benitez Thomas, this whole idea was incepted because once upon a time, our family needed this kind of help. And you're stuck. You're stuck. You can't save. I mean, you got to have a hoopty. You can't have a newer car. And so those sorts of things are part of the system that keeps people down. And the other thing that we know about the system that keeps people at poverty in ways that they cannot get out of, we do know that that usually happens to members of BIPOC communities. And so establishing something like this helps to lift them up to the place where some of their peers are and maybe exceed. So we didn't put a lot of restrictions on it because it's really designed, what do you need? I think now Vice President Harris said on one occasion that most families, if they have a $400 emergency that month, then they're going to see a significant drop in terms of their financial stability. And so you'll see here throughout some of the things that they can use, we're really trying to provide some type of financial stability for people who really want to do that, but right now they're operating in a system that is restrictive.
Thank you. Thank you, Assemblywoman. I have Assemblywoman Thomas for the last question.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you, Senator Spearman and Mr. Jimenez for bringing this bill forward. I think it's a good bill. I like it. And I'll say that because I do. But I want to know the foundation. I heard, earlier about the inception of the program, and I want to know if you had a pilot program 2 years ago, or was it just a structural program in how to the inception of this how it's going to work, and I want to know if there was focus groups, anything like that. How did you arrive at these options, and particularly the age of 12? How did you come up with that? Thank you.
Well, I'll answer the first part. This is a bill that I brought last session, but we couldn't get it out of the Senate. And I do know that people in poverty can't wait for a 2-year study. And so we looked at, I had the idea, and I talked to Eric about it, and he knew of some other states who had done that. And so together we looked at that and tried to model this bill after those which were successful. So with respect to a focus group, my focus group is low wealth communities and just watching what's going on. And that has been amplified during COVID because even those who were not low wealth, right now a lot of them are struggling as well. So we based it upon what's working now and what I know people who are in these types of situations need. And it has always been ridiculous for me that children who age out of foster care is bad English, but ain't got nothing. That's ridiculous. And it leaves them open, especially the girls, the women. It leaves them open and vulnerable to human trafficking. So why are we sitting back saying, oh, it's just such a shame, such a shame? You know, I'm kind of like, you know, if all you're going to do is talk about it and not be about it, then you should stop talking about it. And so this is really about, here's the problem. How do we solve it? Mr. Jimenez?
Yeah, and thank you, Assemblywoman, for the question. Eric Jimenez for the record. This program, this type of program is modeled after that of 42 other states. Particularly how we got to the eligible uses, the age requirement is based on a lot of those programs, particularly the Oregon program. We know this program works. As I mentioned earlier in testimony, we know the participants are far more likely to own a house, to get out of a rental situation, to start their own business. So we know these programs work. I think from our state, we know that we have different challenges and different needs, and that's why last session we had looked at different financing mechanisms to try to do a more robust program. I think until we can get the board operational and get this program up and running, I really think the next 2 years will serve as that pilot program, and hopefully we'll be able to see what some of the gaps are and what type of communities need this the most.
Madam Vice Chair, if I may just add to that. One of the things that is not explicit but implicit for anyone who's been looking at the economic situation of many people in America, this is also an opportunity for members of BIPOC communities to establish a baseline for generational wealth as opposed to generational poverty.
Thank you, Senator. And I do think, Mr. Jimenez, you said earlier that there are already 42 states that have this kind of program. So the pilot programs have been running. They just haven't been running at a cost to our state. So with that, I do believe we have somebody from DHHS on the line who may be able to answer Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson's questions. Mr. Thompson, are you available on Zoom?
Robert Thompson, for the record, I am available. I was not prepared for this meeting, and I'm having trouble getting a video connection.
Okay, well, we can hear you just fine if you don't mind answering a few questions, procedural questions related to Medicaid.
Robert Thompson, for the record, of course.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Ms. Benitez Thompson.
Hello, Mr. Thompson. It's Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, and I appreciate you jumping onto the call. And some of my questions were just to kind of flesh out for the record to make sure we had a good understanding of how the accounts would work with Medicaid. Of course, you're the Medicaid brain, and I think have all 7,000 policy manuals memorized. So I appreciate the fact that you're going to give us a good answer on this. So what I was thinking about was, it sounds like that we don't run afoul of or any concerns around federal rules for what the assets that are contained in the IDA account. One of my question is if there was a ceiling or any federal rules around a ceiling for the amount of assets that could be put into the account that we needed to be aware of.
So, Robert Thompson, for the record, there are no asset tests for the MAGI budgeting of Medicaid. So there's never a consideration for assets for MAGI budgeting. For the medical for the aged, blind, and disabled, there are asset tests, but these assets, to my understanding, are exempt from being counted in the IDA accounts.
Thank you so much. So if someone's doing the Medicaid application, or we have professionals who are working with someone doing these applications, and they would ask the person, do you have an individual, one of these IDA accounts, and the person replied yes, then they don't actually need to, do they need to disclose that anywhere on the Medicaid application, or no, that the application wouldn't even ask them about that?
Robert Thompson, for the record, the Medicaid application is going to ask them, do you have any assets? Usually people are going to answer and they're going to tell us, and then our staff would go through and not count those assets. Or if they specified that it was an IDA account, we would just pass over it.
Perfect, thank you so much. And then any dollars that are used from the IDA account properly for their intended use, in no way those would never come back to be any types of Medicaid fraud at all. Like if dollars got used improperly, we wouldn't have to, there would or wouldn't have to be a look back about whether or not then that should have been income.
Robert Thompson, for the record, you are accurate. Yes, there would not be a negative impact to the Medicaid program by approving the IDA account program.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson, for being able to jump on the meeting. We really appreciate you and your brain for answering these questions. And with that, I don't see any other questions, and we're going to move on to support testimony. Are there folks in the room who would like to testify in support? Please go ahead and come on up. Play musical chairs so we can maintain social distancing if we would. And just as a reminder, we are limiting testimony to 2 minutes, and we are starting a timer for support testimony in total of 20 minutes. Please go ahead.
Vice Chair Peters, members of the committee, my name is Connor Kane, CONNORCAIN. I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 188 on behalf of the Nevada Bankers Association. First, I'd like to recognize and thank Senator Spearman for bringing this very important piece of legislation. I'd like to echo her remarks in stressing the importance of helping low-income Nevadans and other members of our other vulnerable members of our community accumulate assets, become more financially literate, and achieve their financial goals. And as somewhat of an aside, and pardon me, please, Senator Spearman, for going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but Senator Spearman did mention how many Nevadans are underbanked. And that is really important, because if you have just a few $100s in your bank account, it can make all the difference in the world when the unexpected happens. You get a flat tire on your way to work, might not be able to get to work. That means you could lose your job, and you find yourself in a position where you can't support your family. But beyond being ready for the unexpected, which is frankly what this bill is about, we do support efforts to establish this individual development account program. And again, for the reasons that Senator Spearman and Mr. Jimenez focused on, we do want Nevadans who are receiving public assistance to have the opportunity to achieve a higher level of education or purchase their first home. We believe that this bill would help them to work towards that, and therefore it's very, very important. And I will say lastly, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong and Assemblyman Matthews, we do really appreciate the interest that both of you have in financial literacy. We believe it's critical. And this bill outlines part of the process to make sure folks receive financial literacy instruction. We'd be happy to be at the table and help develop curriculums or do anything else that we can. Again, appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 188, and we would encourage all of your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have at least one more in the room for support testimony. Ms. Bertie, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Vice Chair Peters and members of the committee. Kendra Birchie with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. I'm testifying today on behalf of my office, as well as for John Pirro with the Clark County Public Defender's Office. We want to thank Senator Spearman for bringing forward this bill. We supported it last session as well, and hope that it will make it into law this session. As many of the members of this committee know, we unfortunately need to protect our most vulnerable citizens, especially those who were previously in foster care. I cannot talk today. There is a disproportional amount of children who are in the foster care system who then enter into the juvenile justice system, as well as those who do not have the means. And so we do believe that this will help prevent that foster care to prison pipeline and provide those who need it the most, our most vulnerable citizens, with financial means and an ability to hopefully not enter into the criminal justice system in their future. So we really appreciate this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Birchie. With that, I think we don't have anybody else in the room for support testimony. So BPS, would you please queue up the line for support testimonies of SB 188?
To testify in support of Senate Bill 188, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Deshaun Jackson, DASHUNJACKSON. Serve as the Director of Children's Safety and Welfare Policy with the Children's Advocacy Alliance. The Children's Advocacy Alliance would like to stand in support of Senate Bill 188 and also thank Senator Spearman. As a former foster youth that aged out of the system in Nevada, I believe that this bill is essential to not only the growth and the development of youth that are transitioning out of the system, but the sustainability. This bill will provide them with the opportunity to not only save, but build for the future. Many foster youth, as you've already heard, as they transition out of the system, don't necessarily have those supports that other folks that have not entered the system have. They lack financial stability. They oftentimes lack family stability. And so what this does is it allows that cushion. It also allows for those youth, like myself, to have those opportunities that other youth don't have. And it also provides this safety net, which does then prevents them from entering the correctional facility or the homeless population. Thank you so much, Senator Spearman and committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I apologize for butchering your name previously. I was reading off of a spreadsheet and misread it completely. Thank you for your testimony. Next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 044. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner, TIFFANY TYLER GARNER, and you've already heard from my colleague, Deshaun Jackson, specifically to speak about the impact of this legislation for foster youth. I am calling to speak to some of the earlier questions that arose during the hearing. In particular, I want to note that there's a wide body of research regarding what is called benefits cliffs. And people face benefits cliffs when they receive public benefits from the government, earn some income, and then discover that they make too much to receive the benefits but are not making enough to sustain themselves and their household. This approach will go a long way to mitigating that, not only as we grapple with generational poverty, where folks have found themselves caught in that perpetual cycle of dependence in some respects, but also situational poverty, which is on the rise right now. So as we consider the power of this legislation, I hope we're looking at its impact for a number of Nevadan households and asking that we not put folks in a situation where they're trying to save to get out of poverty by either furthering their education or preparing for housing stability by asking them to choose between saving to get out of it and whether or not they'll have current coverage or current housing because our policies are in conflict. And so from a broader perspective, I hope that what we're considering as we weigh this is can we foster pathways for folks to really get out of poverty, because we're not asking them to choose between the financial literacy and its practices that we hope that they will more broadly adopt, right? Because we say, why aren't you saving? But when they do put them in a situation where literally they would lose health care coverage or lose housing because we haven't thought through conflicts in our policy across systems or across programs. So I would just underscore and say ditto to what Deshaun Jackson said. Thank the sponsor, Senator Spearman, but ask that we consider that this is a larger issue that has had a number of articles published about it. There have been a number of other states that have adopted approaches to mitigate the impact of benefits cliffs, including what happens when you ask people to save or participate in training or get a job at a higher wage, and then they lose things like their housing assistance or Medicare assistance before they're at a place where they're fully dependent enough to not rely on those resources. So I hope we will put it in that larger context. So I thank you for any consideration you might give to this legislation and want to note that this kind of practice will go a long way to transitioning folks from safety nets because we're thinking through policy conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 261. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jillian Block. That's GILLIANBLOCK. And I'm calling on behalf of the Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. The Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada and Washoe Legal Services represent 100% of children in the child welfare system. We support SB 188, and we'd like to thank Senator Spearman and the Treasurer's Office for bringing it. We believe this is an important measure that will make a difference for our clients in foster care. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Are there other folks who are calling in support of SB 188?
Yes, Chair. Would caller with the last three digits 085 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Alyssa Cortez, ALYSSA Cortez, CORTES. I'm the Program Associate for Silver State Equality, a statewide LGBTQ plus civil rights organization. And we are in support of Senate Bill 188. The transition age youth who age out of or exit foster care are at a high risk of experiencing homelessness. Additionally, LGBTQ plus youth are systemically more likely to have little resources and support to rely upon than their non-LGBTQ plus peers. Therefore, Silver State Equality is in supportive of the creation of an individual development account for youth exiting foster care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms.
Sir,
Cortez.
there are no more callers in support.
No more callers. Thank you so much. We can go ahead and move on for callers in opposition. It does not appear that there's anyone in the room in opposition, so I'd ask BPS to go to the lines, please.
To participate, to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 188, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Go ahead and move on to callers to anyone in neutral in the room. Not seeing any, I would ask BPS to ask for callers in neutral.
To testify in neutral to Senate Bill 188, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. And with that, I would offer the presenters an opportunity for closing statements. Thank you so much, Senator. Really appreciate you being here. Let's see. I believe next and with that, I will close the hearing on SB 188. And I will now open the hearing on Senate Bill 309. I'm sorry? I'm going to call 1 minute recess, please. Welcome back, Senator. Good to see you. It's good timing. Thank you so much. I will bring us back into, what do I say? Back to order. And we'll go ahead and ask the Senator if she would go ahead and I guess I will reopen the hearing on Senate Bill 309. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Assembly Health and Human Services. I am Senator Dina Neal, representing District 4. I am here to introduce SB 309 and then turn it over to Joanna Jacob of Clark County. Just to give you a quick brief history on SB 309. SB 309 is a part of, it has a legacy from last session for AB 73. AB 73 was a bill that was brought by the city of Las Vegas where they wanted to try to find funding for homelessness. It actually had a sewer fee that they were trying to enlist in the bill, and I changed their bill to make all the local governments work together to find a plan for homelessness. SB 309 is actually the result of all of those local governments getting together over the biennium in order to come up with a plan. And so this bill reflects what they decided to do, was to establish a reinvestment advisory committee and get a seat at the table in regards to how the MCOs spend their money. And so that is ultimately what this is. And then I will turn it over to Joanna Jacobs to break down the rest of the bill and go through why they chose this as an option after not being able to receive specified sewer funding that I pretty much stripped out of the bill in 2019.
Thank you so much. Yes, Ms. Jacobs, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Peters, members of the committee, Joanna Jacob, Clark County Government Affairs Manager, and I have to say it's I'm very glad to be here in front of you today. It's an excellent introduction by Senator Neal. It's true that the bill from last session set up an interim working group that we collaborated on, Clark County and our municipal partners, all of the cities in Southern Nevada, as well as the nonprofit service providers that work in homelessness, to come together to talk about, as a region, what is a plan for us to address homelessness. The reason why you have SB 309 before you is that the AB 73 report came out with recommendations in 6 different areas. Realistically, all of the local governments, as well as the state, are fiscally challenged. I don't have to say that here in front of this committee. We are very well aware of the fiscal challenges. But we came up with a variety of policy recommendations. Some of them can be addressed at the local level. One of them, though, we felt was appropriate for this bill was to try and find a way that we can work together with the private sector and try and find ways to create and build on private partnerships and with the public sector. So what we decided, and this was a recommendation, I will note also for the record, the AB 73 report that the local governments did was adopted by each of our local government, our governing boards, went to all the Clark County Commission as well as all of our cities. So what you had in that report is actually a consensus amongst the city and the county on kind of a pathway forward on how we can address this. This bill alone is not going to address homelessness, and it's not the only thing that we need to do. We know that, but I will just explain for context that the Medicaid division is currently putting out a managed care RFP. And we do have Cody Finney on the line on the Zoom, as you saw earlier, and she can answer questions about that RFP process. She's an excellent resource. But in that RFP, there is a provision for something called community reinvestment funds. And this is a method of collaboration with managed care and their state partners that is in place in other states. For example, in Arizona, the state does mandate that their managed care partners set aside a portion of their profit to put into community reinvestment. Community reinvestment funds can be used and are used for state priorities and also to address social determinants of health and things that will help the managed care companies and the state kind of address things that like housing, transportation, homelessness, some of the things that are really high cost drivers in the healthcare system. I want to tell you why we've gotten some questions about why does managed care want to invest in homelessness and housing. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned Arizona. There they partnered with both the state and a nonprofit to contribute some capital funding for a housing complex. So the managed care company provided the funding to help the local government build the complex. Then they basically can bring in case management and care management to the people who are housed in that facility. A portion of the units at that complex are set aside specifically, 20% of the units are set aside specifically for homeless, high utilizers of the healthcare system. We also have, so you'll see these programs nationwide, but even in Clark County, we have a similar program that started out, it was known as Hospital to Home. I know you've heard about this with a bill from Assemblywoman Thomas about how do we plan for care post-discharge to the hospital. We partnered with one managed care company, and since then it's been expanded to all 3 of our managed care partners, now known as the Healthy Living Program. And under this, the county provides housing vouchers, and then the managed care companies come in and they contract with Help of Southern Nevada. It's a local nonprofit provider to provide case management, but it is a way for us to help people get out of the hospital and to safely get housing needs addressed, and then they can better focus on their health outcomes. So to date, about 139 individuals have been served in that program. And so this type of collaboration and partnership is what we had in mind when we asked Senator Neal to consider SB 309. Walking through very briefly, the bill sets up the Reinvestment Advisory Committee in Clark County in Section 3. And it has members both from the county and from the cities, from the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services, with the nonprofit sector. This is all the people who were involved in our AB 73 report. We also included, you'll see in Section 3, subsection 2C, any other members that the director deems necessary or appropriate to serve as non-voting members. This is actually language that was suggested to us by the managed care companies when we heard this in the Senate, so that they would have a forum to be collaborating with this committee, that they can be appointed as non-voting members. It is very similar to something that we have in place and have had in place since 2017 with the Advisory Committee on Medicaid Innovation. This is how the managed care companies already partner with the state and have the seat at the table. I will tell you, so Section 4 kind of sets up the committee. The most important section is Section 5 in my mind, because this is really what the committee is going to do. We are going to use the committee to get reports from the state and from the managed care vendors about the reinvestment of funds by the Medicaid managed care organizations in the community. But then we've also written in two-way communication so that the local governments and the nonprofits will also inform the managed care companies and the state about what we're doing. We hear a lot about silos in healthcare and about initiatives. And this is something that we really wanted to break down all together. It is not managed care's responsibility, nor can they do it alone. The state, as you know, cannot do this alone. The counties and the local governments also cannot do this alone. So together, we wanted to provide a forum where we can talk about our goals and priorities to make our collective dollars go further. The other thing in here is that we'll talk about innovative partnerships with the community development organizations and about how it could be supporting local governments. We are a key stakeholder, we believe. I'm biased, I work for Clark County, but we are the regional service provider, and we find that we can partner, but often we need a forum, I think, and maybe a more formal way to make sure that we are all working together. The important thing here, too, is that we've written in an annual report to the legislature so that you will be informed as the policymakers of the activities of this committee. Where are these reinvestment funds going? Who is getting them? And what efforts are being done? I think we have targeted in this committee, we've tried to keep it really broad, that the goal of the committee would be to address housing and homelessness, but also social determinants of health, which housing is a social determinant of health, also transportation, all of the things that we really found were drivers of things that are contributing to homelessness in Southern Nevada. And that is basically the bill. I will tell you the effective date is January 1st, 2022, and that was a effective date that the state, we did collaborate with the state on this bill draft as well, and that will align with when they should have the new vendors in place. And so then as soon as the new vendors are in place, as well as that contract provision, then the committee will be appointed. And that is my overview, and I can stand for questions with Senator Neal. Thank you.
Great. Ms. Finney, did you have anything to add here, or are you on the line for questions?
Thank you, Ms. Peters. Cody Finney, for the record, I am here to help with questions.
Perfect. So I have questions from the committee members. I have Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson first, and then I will come to you, Ms. Titus.
Thank you so much for the questions, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. So I obviously very much remember the conversation from last session, and I know that Clark County and the local governments were wonderful in their creativity, and that ultimately there was a feeling that, that we needed a better nexus between the funding source and the conversation, and that the appreciation by the local governments to pivot to a different kind of conversation was one that was, I know we were all appreciative of. I guess as I look at this bill here, so I'm thinking a lot of different things. I guess the first thing that I'm thinking of is this is just for counties over 700,000. There's only one. And so does it make sense to have just one county having this conversation? It's specific to the county, and that makes sense. But I'm thinking of like the reports back and forth that you have that the Advisory Reinvestment Committee will do, kind of in that reciprocal exchange of conversation that you were talking about, Ms. Jacobs, that there'll be reports coming from the state, but then also reports going to the state to help inform policy. Does it make more sense to have more voices and more regions participating in that, not in your advisory committee, but just soliciting input about how these MCO dollars are being used in the grounds in other places?
Thank you for the question, Dina Neal, for the record, to Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Please feel free to go straight to the.
Be like, to you and through you to, okay. So we had this conversation on the Senate side, right? And the question that was asked by Senator Ratty was, why can't we do this in Washoe, or why can't Washoe participate? And Washoe doesn't actually have an interest in, I guess, moving down this pathway or participating. But what you're saying is adding their voice to the table. Now, that's a separate conversation. I don't think we asked them, because what was asked was, this would work well in Washoe, so why don't you guys consider this as well? So I think that we could probably ask that question in regards to, do you at least just want a voice, meaning a participant? Because the bill, I think, allows that, because there's a catch-all language. If you look in Section 3, sub C, line 24, in my version, where it says that other persons that the director deems necessary or appropriate as serving as non-voting members, the catch-all is there, so a person, other entities that are other humans who are not a part of the South could be on the board, could be appointed without us even having to amend the bill because of that catch-all language that's there.
I appreciate so much, and I appreciate the willingness, because I think one of the things is, especially specific to these pot of dollars, is we typically at the state level don't really see how they're being used. We will see perhaps at the interim finance committee, a recommendation come through for like a piece of the puzzle, and we're like, oh, look, what is this? And how is that working? And we all seem intrigued, but they are otherwise projects that don't necessarily fall on our map. And of course, we need to, one of my favorite phrases that I use, coming from Senator Neal, we need to make a penny sing. We need a penny to be split 8 different ways doing 8 different things, right? So if there's an opportunity to better braid state resources and supports with the local dollars and the managed care organization reinvestment dollars, then we could get some synergy for bigger products, but we don't, or bigger projects, but we don't see those right now. So I really like that piece. And I appreciate your willingness to say that more voices at the table will be beneficial.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I also agree. I think with the transiency of our state, we know that some of our homeless population don't stay in parts of the state for the entire year even, and often move about the state. So I think that that's an appropriate ask of the other counties if they'd like. Assemblywoman Titus, please, with your question.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question, and thank you for the explanation and bringing this back with some clarity to it. I need some more clarity, I guess, on Section 5, number A on the bill itself. It talks about what the committee is going to do, and that's going to get a review from the Division of Medicaid Managed Organizations concerning the reinvestment of funds by those managed care organizations. Are they already mandated to reinvest a certain percent of their profit prepayment type of thing? And if so, what percent?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Assemblywoman
Please
Titus.
feel free
I
to go
will.
straight to-
I'll defer that to Ms. Finney because there is. I believe that is coming. And then if there's further questions about the intent of Section 5 Sub A, I can follow up after Ms. Finney comments.
Thank you. Cody Finney for the record from the Division of Healthcare Finance and Policy. Assemblywoman Titus, thank you for the question. The mechanism that creates this is in our managed care RFP that is currently out for bid and would go into effect the 1st of January 2022. And that would require the plans to reinvest 3% of their profits that are associated with this program.
So, and there's no, the RFP, so it's basically a provider tax, so to speak, in my view, that you're, in order to bid to become an MCO for our Medicaid population under this RFP, part of that understanding will be that you have 3% of your profits will have to go back to this program, and this program alone. Is that correct?
Cody Finney for the record. So the contract is set up to require that 3% of the profits would have to go for community reinvestment. It's my understanding that those dollars would go directly from the managed care organization to the approved plan. So in the RFP, there are some examples given about the kinds of priorities that are the state is looking for, and that the state would be able to approve the plan that the vendors are investing in.
Okay. So I guess where I'm going with my question is, it's assumed that these managed care organizations are for-profit, and the argument has been made that we allow them to be our Medicaid managers because in the long run, even though they're making a profit, there's some value to it because we feel in the long term they save the state money, and there's some argument on both sides of that. However, do you have any idea then, based on the profits that you have seen in the past from these Medicaid organizations, how much funding this revenue this would generate?
Cody Finney for the record, thank you. Had this been in place for this year, and it was not, so this is could be very different in 2022 because we'll have new contracts, and those contracts, this RFP is set up to allow some different design of the program. There could be more vendors, but based on the information we have today, had this program been in place for this year, we would have expected it to generate about $7 million in community investment.
Only in the Clark County under this criteria, it would $7 million for Clark County, correct?
So Cody Finney for the record, I would certainly defer to Ms. Jacobs and the senator. There is nothing in the contract that limits that investment to Clark County. The advisory committee is limited to Clark County.
All right, and so I understand this, and Madam Vice Chair, I recognize this is not a money committee, and that can be vetted out at some other time, but it is part of the policy of this bill is to, when we put out these RFPs in the future to support this bill, we're going to require that they pay 3% of their profits back towards the investment in this, what this bill does. And so I just wanted to make sure we understood that policy connected with the money. And then recognizing that there would potentially be a $7 million investment regarding that. If other managed care organizations sign up for this and the profits are made, although those folks, as a little bit along the line of questioning of our majority leader regarding profits and who can benefit from this, And I recognize, and members know that in the rural areas, most of it, we don't have necessarily the managed care organizations. We have, fee for service, so it's a different role model. So I understand why it would be limited to certain areas, because the managed care organizations are not everywhere. But I too would like some information, making sure that if this goes forward, I have always had anxiety about these managed care organizations making a profit on our Nevada Medicaid system. So I like the concept that they give back to the community some of this profit and invest into our community, but certainly would like to see the concept expanded throughout our state. So thank you for that. More of a comment than a question. Thank you.
I have Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson who would like to add something as well.
Yeah, and I think this can be for Ms. Finney to correct us, but I mean, the policy to go ahead and do a request for proposal, the ending time of the last set of managed care organizations and all of those are votes that we have taken, right? So we already approved the ability to go out and to contract. I think we actually did last session, the RFI, the request for information for the division to go out and start talking more. I've talked a lot on the record about their ability to go out and do the contracting. So we did, as a legislature, as a body, we took those votes and gave them the ability to go out. And now we're kind of, I would say, in terms of how contracting goes in the home stretch of it, right? Where there'll be a blackout period pretty soon. We will not be communicated or lobbied for by any of the ones who are bidding, because they have to stop doing that at some point. And then we'll have contracts coming, within I think it's 2022, but it's kind of a long process, and I would hate to confuse this bill with those other wheels that we've already put into motion, because unless we're going to flip back from, ending away with MCOs, it's kind of where we are and where we've been now for a couple of years. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't confusing the record about the conversations that we were having or the decision points that we had the autonomy and the ability to make right now.
Thank you. And would any of you like to comment back or respond?
Thank you, Chair Peters. I just wanted to make just a comment in response to Assemblywoman Titus and then to Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. I certainly, Assemblywoman Thomas, appreciate your comments, and I did want to just emphasize that the state is dictating, at least I know this from my conversations with Ms. Finney, certain priorities for community reinvestment. Those will be state priorities. The committee that we're setting up here is advisory. It is not, and this is one of the questions, and because I had the conversation with the managed care vendors, I feel very comfortable speaking to this. This is meant to help them find the vehicle to do the community reinvestment and to align with the local governments so that they're not looking for those opportunities, or that we are working together on that. It does not mean that the managed care companies have to forego an opportunity that might come up outside of the committee. It is not this is the be all and definitive plan. I will also note though, and the reason it's focused in Southern Nevada, one significant finding that we had out of the AB 73 report was the amount of behavioral health Medicaid expenditures in the state. 79.9% of the behavioral health spend in Medicaid is in Southern Nevada. That is $244 million out of the $306 million that we spend as a state in Southern Nevada. That is why we have a lot of stakeholders. We have a lot of population that we have to take care of. That's why you see a formal committee structure. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, I don't think that this means that Washoe County is not interested in working with the managed care, but they maybe don't need this formal structure that we have put in place that was a priority for our community, the one that we represent. It's about putting local government at the table to make sure that we're aligning when we don't have that direct contractual relationship, but we are also engaged as one of the largest service providers in the state. I will note, just because I can see him, I have Assistant County Manager Kevin Schiller on the phone too, if there's any other questions about just our Clark County priorities, but this is why it's set up the way that it is. And we can certainly, I'll defer if Senator Neal has any other comments.
Thank you for that. And so, Senator Dina Neal, for the record,
Because there were a couple of things in Assemblywoman Titus's questions / comments. Number one, about that 7 million, because it sounded like, when I was listening to you, it sounded like you were trying to ask, how long will this go? Will this be in perpetuity for that 3%? How will the 7 million, if the 7 million is for the whole state, is 7 million specifically towards Clark County? Or how do you know whether or not, 4 million should go to Clark under the readvisory goals, or should 3 million go to somewhere else where they actually are housed MCOs? And so the way that, and correct me if that is what I was hearing, but the way I understood it was Clark County is trying to get a seat at the table to then drive the MCO investment towards these 3 key categories that are in the bill, right? The homelessness, housing, and then the social determinants. But I don't think that it is prescriptive to the 7 million, and that 7 million is hypothetical based on if it had been enacted today. But I do think that the RFP or whatever is created by Division of Health and Human Services will then drive what those parameters are, how broad that is, whether or not it includes homelessness, housing, social determinants, and behavioral health, and something else. And I also think that the length of time of the RFP will determine how long that investment will work, because the reporting piece that's in the bill, which is talking about the uses, right? The activities that actually occurred under this Envision Advisory Committee, I think is very important to determine whether or not, number one, it was effective. That's the first key thing of anything that we ever pass. Did it work? 2, and if it did work, should we continue this for the next RFP cycle? And if it did not, then, the legislature, because it's statutory, will then have the power to come back and say, well, you tried it, theory didn't work, and now let's refine this, and let's change these goals, because based on the report, it didn't work. And the 3%, 2%, or whatever it ended up looking like for Clark County didn't manifest the goal that Clark County was seeking. But I do think that this is the first step in order to allow them to sit at the table, because typically you don't get to tell an MCO what to do, right? I mean, typically the hands are tied in general, but now they get a seat at the table to at least drive the purposes and say, hey, you ought to consider this, you ought to think about this, and then there's money to back it. And so I know that was a lot, but I was trying to get at some of the things that you were getting at, because I'm all about effectiveness, right? If it doesn't work, I will be the first person at the table with the strip out language to SB 309 saying, hey, it's 2023, this didn't work, you no longer have this ability.
Thank you. I have one more question from Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, and I just want to remind the committee we do have one more hearing hopefully today, and we do have a hard stop at 4 o'clock.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Just speaking, thank you very much, Senator Neal, for bringing this bill, Ms. Jacobs for being present, and those who are on Zoom. Quick question. So this is not new. MCOs, have they or have they not, I should say that. Is this a new concept that MCOs are supposed to be or expected to be or voluntarily do reinvestment? And if it's not new, do we have ideas of what they've done before? Has there been tracking of what they've done before? Do we know what kind of dollars they've been putting back into the community and how? Thank you.
So I'll let Ms. Jacobs answer, but Dina Neal for the record. What I think is new is the public-private partnership and having a seat at the table. That's what I think is new. Has it happened at other places? Yes, but I'll let Ms. Jacob discuss that.
Thank you, Senator Neal, and to you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. No, I did mention the Arizona project in my testimony, and this is, and to their credit, I will say, the managed care companies do voluntarily invest in housing projects across the nation, and they have partnered with Clark County. This was something that Assistant County Manager Kevin Schiller worked on with the project that we talked about in Clark County. And I think, to Senator Neal's point, this is about making sure that when we do invest, that the local governments, we have our own initiatives, and our nonprofit partners do as well, that we can work together. And these projects, I'll give you another example. They're throughout California, where it's usually takes the place of investing in housing, where there's housing, but then the counties are there to provide. They partner as well to provide the vouchers or any other thing that comes with. And then everybody really can invest in those interventions that will hopefully, and they do believe, the reason why they invest in these things is because it drives better health outcomes. Because once people's housing is in place, then they can focus on their health and medication adherence and all of those things that managed care must track with their contract with the state. So I don't know if Ms. Finney has anything else, but that's my answer. Thank you.
Cody Finney, for the record, I would simply add that what's new for our division is the requirement for this participation. Our current plans have done some of this kind of investment in housing and other forms of social determinants in the current contract period. The only thing that's new from us is a requirement for that in the future.
Thank you all. And we're seeing no other questions from the committee. We will go ahead and go into support testimony. Is there anybody in the room? I don't see anybody in the room. BPS, can we go ahead to the phones for support testimony?
To testify in support of Senate Bill 309, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The caller with the last 3 digits, 380, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 380, please press star 6 to unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Kelly Crompton, representing the City of Las Vegas, KELLYCROMPTON. The City of Las Vegas is in support of SB 309 and the work that the committee, the AB 73 committee did over the interim, and would like to thank Senator Neal for bringing this bill forward. This legislation is important to Southern Nevada to continue working collaboratively on addressing the needs of our community, and we thank you for hearing the bill and asking your questions. I'd like to also, my colleagues from the City of Henderson and the City of North Las Vegas were unable to call in today, but they have signed in support, and I'd like to put their support for this bill on the record as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next caller in support, please.
There are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. And I was remiss and did not check on the Zoom. Is there anybody on the Zoom who would like to testify in support? Not seeing any. I would go ahead and ask broadcast to ask for opposition testimony on SB 309.
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 309, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. I don't believe there's anybody on the Zoom either, but if we could just check real quick. Not seeing anybody, I would ask broadcast to go ahead and ask for testimony in neutral on SB 309.
To testify in neutral to Senate Bill 309, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. BPS, is there anybody on the Zoom who would like to testify in neutral on SB 309? Not seeing anybody. We'll go ahead and ask the bill sponsor if they would like to have some closing remarks.
No, okay, sorry. Senator Tina Neal for the record. Thank you, Assembly Health and Human Services, for hearing this bill, and we hope that you will positively view this bill and give us a vote of support to move it out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Neal. It's great to have you back in the Assembly for a little bit. And with that, I'll close the hearing on SB 309, and I will now open the hearing. I see Senator Donate here on Senate Bill 396. This bill revises provisions related to the purchasing of prescription drugs. Welcome, Senator Donate. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Chair Peters, and good afternoon to the members of the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services. For the record, my name is Fabian Donate, and I represent Senate District 10 in the heart of Las Vegas. On behalf of the committee to conduct an interim study concerning the cost of prescription drugs, I am truly honored to be here with you all today to present on the work that was completed by my predecessor, Senator Ivana Cancela. Senate Bill 396 revises provisions relating to the purchasing of prescription drugs. Under the proposed legislation, SB 396 would authorize public agencies of the state to enter into agreements with certain entities in other jurisdictions for the collaborative purchasing of prescription drugs. In essence, what we're trying to do today is if we combine our purchasing power collaboratively with other states or entities, the better off our state will be to reduce the high costs of prescription drugs. Generally, in the healthcare sector, the term Regional Purchasing Coalition, or RPC, is utilized to describe a group of providers or entities leveraging their collective purchasing power to lower prices on necessary supplies. And according to Definitive Healthcare, which is a healthcare company that offers software data solutions to healthcare organizations, there are many benefits that could arise with the construction provided by a regional purchasing coalition. Beyond the purchase power that is facilitated by these organizations, participants of a purchasing coalition may benefit from data sharing and utilization, networking, best practice communication, and performance improvement through trend identification. Of course, to address the increasing costs of prescription drugs, we need open and transparent conversations about the workings of the entire pharmaceutical value chain. Greater focus on transparency will mean that all stakeholders will need to come together, seeking to find solutions to bring out-of-pocket costs down for patients who need it the most. But to accomplish that goal, we need to access every tool that we can get our hands on, whether it is enacted by policy or accomplished at the community level. What excites me most about this legislation is how it prioritizes access to care services, which is always a conversation that is left behind when addressing the rising costs of healthcare throughout our nation. Access to care begins with acknowledging the systemic barriers that stand in our way for patients and their families, and it means taking the right step to fight for those who may not have the willpower to do so themselves. If we allow certain entities with the opportunity to enter into purchasing coalitions, we can ensure that Nevada can begin to influence and modulate supply chain costs, and that itself can provide employers and consumers the right information needed to actually address the cost of a prescription drug. Multi-state and interagency purchasing plans have a transformative impact to how Nevada conducts its decision-making with regard to the pharmaceutical industry, and in fact, now more than ever, we recognize just how valuable our collective power can be, especially when we consider the ramifications that have occurred without this collaboration. If we choose to ignore the rising costs of prescription drugs, more and more families will be impacted by our inaction. Rationing of drugs due to the unaffordability of them is a policy failure. We can change this by supporting this legislation in SB 396. And at this time, I see that we have my fellow colleagues. So with the permission of Chair Peters, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Beth Slamowitz, Senior Policy Advisor on Pharmacy for the Nevada Department of Health and Human Services, who can go over the bill language.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Slamowitz, please proceed.
Thank you, Senator Donate, and thank you, Chairwoman and committee members. For the record, my name is Beth Slamowitz. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for Pharmacy for the Department of Health and Human Services. With Senator Donate's overview of purchasing coalitions, I just wanted to follow up with some information regarding current statute and expressed authority. Currently in statute, there's expressed authority for intrastate purchasing coalitions for prescription drugs that include state and local governmental entities and nonprofit organizations located within NRS 277.110. That statute broadly states that any public agency may exercise any power jointly with a public agency of any other state, Additionally, NRS 333.435 allows a using agency to join with governmental entities of other states to purchase prescription drugs. SB 396, Section 1, amends NRS 4224025 and authorizes the Department of Health and Human Services to enter into agreements for the purchase of prescription drugs from Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program with private entities within or outside the state. Section 2 authorizes the department to enter into a contract with one or more public or private entities from this state or other states for the collaborative purchasing of prescription drugs. Existing law imposes certain requirements concerning transparency, rebates, and auditing on contract between the department and pharmacy benefit manager or health maintenance organization. Subsection 2 of Section 2, as well as language in Section 3, exempt a contract entered into for the collaborative purchasing of prescription drugs between the department and a PBM or HMO for those requirements. The exemption would not affect contracts unrelated to purchasing coalitions. Section 3.3 and 3.6 amends both NRS 277 and our NRS 333 and proposes legislation to additionally authorize public agencies in the state to enter into agreements for the purchase of prescription drugs, pharmaceutical service, or medical supplies and related services with private entities within or outside the state. So in conclusion, current expressed authority exists for both public to public as well as private to private, whether intra or interstate. SB 396 looks to expand that authority to both public to private in intra and interstate purchasing coalitions. And with that, I'll stop for any additional questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, I have Assemblywoman Thomas first, and then I will go to Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair, and thank you, Senator Dante and Dr. Slamowitz, for your presentation. I really do appreciate it. I have just a basic question, especially with what has happened during this pandemic, how we were at a loss for pharmaceutical products. I would like to know why we are not collaborating with, our European governments, for pharmaceutical products. Why are we just relegating it to United States? Because, some of the products are at a lower cost, actually, in other countries. And I was wondering why are we limiting ourselves? Thank you.
Dr. Slamowitz, would you be able to respond to that question?
Sure, Beth Slamowitz for the record. So I think that it is definitely something that is being considered not only at a state level, but at a national level. I know that there has been lots of conversation in terms of importation from Canada. And then I know from a federal level, there were conversations and legislation brought forward through the Trump administration to look at aligning pricing with European pricing. I think it's incredibly complex, and I think that there are laws in terms of importation that need to change and occur from the federal level before it would even trickle down to a state level. But I know it's something that is a constant conversation in looking at ways to decrease the price of prescription drugs in this country.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that we had testimony last session that our policy analyst could speak to regarding this particular issue. No?
Thank you very much. Patrick Ashton, Committee Policy Analyst. Just wanted to mention that the committee to study the cost of prescription drugs had various testimony in regards to that, and I can certainly send the members the link and information about that testimony, what is currently allowed by state government and federal government for your information.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ashton. I am going to go ahead to Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, please, with your questions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to ask a question. My question would be on, the way I read this is that if we did as a state enter into these contracts, these collaborative purchasing agreements, then it looks to me like they're not going to be subject to NRS 422 4056, which is all of the auditing provisions and then the posting of the audit. So I heard you mention that there's going to be transparency, and I didn't know if there was another section that's being referenced that's different from the 422 audit section. But as chair of the Legislative Audit Committee, I tend to be against anything that takes away the ability to audit, so.
Dr. Slamowitz, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. So Beth Slumwitz for the record, and thank you for the question. And so my understanding of the reasoning for removing that language is to allow Medicaid to enter into these contracts that go beyond the state, so from one state to the next. Although it may present the language that says that it's exempt within those contracts, that doesn't stop that language from being in those contracts. And I can tell you certainly from Medicaid perspective that any contract that they would enter into, especially with a pharmacy benefit manager or a health maintenance organization in terms of managing prescription drugs, that audit rights would definitely be tied into that contract. I think it just removes it from NRS requirement, but certainly I think by good contracting practice, it would be something that any organization would want as a requirement.
If I could add to that. So I think something that we learned when we started in on managing the first set of the managed care organizations that we did, and we had, 2 that we did. We've done another round, and then there were 4. And with each time, we've gotten more savvy. But I have to tell you what, sat through lots of hearings where we ask, well, can we get data? Well, no, we can't because our contract doesn't allow it. Well, can we get this? Well, they say that's proprietary, so we can't get that. And so we get better, I think, as a state at how we learn how to negotiate these contracts. But I would still say that we are, in a lot of ways, in the learning phase. I think one of the things that we were most surprised about in some of these conversations that I learned was, these healthcare systems show up with, they've got just a room full of lawyers who are negotiating these contracts, and we're the state of Nevada, and we're like, hey, Ways Committee, can you put one more person in the Department of Administration to help help with these RFPs? So we tend to be outgunned, quite frankly. And I like the security of having agencies default back to NRS to say, it's got to be in there. It's just boilerplate. We're going to audit. We want the ability to track down these dollars. So I would think that it remains smart to keep NRS as the backstop for requiring the audit of where our state dollars are being used, regardless of how far or how collaborative they are being used. And that those are good things. I would just hate to lose this. I think it would be important to have the NRS serve as a backstop in this case.
Thank you. Would you like to respond, or we can move on to next question? Okay.
I certainly can respond. That's Slumwitz for the record. I definitely do not disagree, and I would probably have to default back to Senator Doñate, to go back and look at the reasoning for putting that language in. I believe that there was some sort of legality in it in terms of allowing Medicaid to enter into these coalitions. And that's why also NRS 422-4025 was involved. So I'd have to default back to that and perhaps bring some information back to the Assemblywoman in terms of the reasoning behind that.
Thank you. I don't know if our legal would like to weigh in.
Sure, Carly O'Krent for the record. It's my understanding that if those transparency provisions were removed from the bill, since those things are required in 422.
Thank you so much.
If we could say that one more time, I was following along. So if we remove the provisions of 422, 4056, do I hear, and I guess that was my original question, is it living somewhere else in 422?
I'm sorry, what I was intending to say was that the exemptions could be removed from this bill for those provisions if it was the preference of this committee.
Okay.
But if they were removed, then Medicaid wouldn't have the flexibility to join in on those agreements.
Does that answer your question, Assemblywoman?
I think we can keep bird dogging it. I'm not a lawyer, so that's why I always ask, like, is there another reference to a section? If we take out one reference, is there something else? So I think it's probably how the chapter's working together, and I could have legal walk it through me or walk me through this, because I don't see anything specifically in, I guess I would need to know what a 422, 4056 is preventing it, and if there's a way to keep in the audit provision without, they don't seem mutually exclusive to me, I guess is what I'm saying. But we can, now that I've got it on the record, we can continue the conversation later.
Perfect, thank you. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong also has a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Senator and Ms. Slumowitz. And I have to co-sign what my colleague is saying. I'm very concerned about that. We have had similar issues on other things that affect my community, and we're not able to ask for data. And so I would like you all to please, once you figure it out or get the information, to share it. Because we will never know if we're actually saving any money if we can't do an audit. We could be being overcharged if we can't do an audit. And so if we can't check, then it may not be worth it. So I would really appreciate backup information. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll have some follow-up with the committee before this bill may come up for work session. So are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I would go ahead and see if there's any support. I do not see anybody in the room. Is there any support on the Zoom? Seeing none, I would ask broadcast to go ahead and open up the public line for support testimony on SB 396.
To testify in support of Senate Bill 396, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 484, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 484, please press star 6 to unmute. Okay, we'll come back to that caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 287, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 287. Please press star 6 to unmute. Caller, you appear to be unmuted on our end, but we cannot hear you. Are you muted on your end?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please
Hello?
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Peters and members of the committee. My name is Mary Liberati, MaryLiveratti. I'm a volunteer with AARP. AARP worked with the interim committee on drug costs during the interim, and we also support this bill. Americans should not have to pay the highest drug prices in the world. Life-saving drugs do not work if you cannot afford them. In some cases, people may be forced to skip doses or cut pills in half due to the cost. We believe people should not have to choose between buying medicine or paying for food and housing. Group purchasing has proven to work in other states and lowers costs. The more groups and people in the pool, the better it is to enable negotiating for lower costs. We enjoyed working with Senator Kinsella, and we appreciate her efforts in lowering costs of prescription drugs for Nevada's families. AARP, on behalf of 345,000 members, strongly supports SB 369 and urges this committee to pass it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have another caller in support?
Yes, with the caller with the last three digits, 120, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 120. You appear to be unmuted on our end. Are you muted on yours?
Hi, Stacey Sasso with the Health Services Coalition. We are in support of SB 396. Creating a purchasing coalition is another step forward in achieving affordable healthcare access. Now more than ever, the state needs to make changes that can positively impact the economy and the budget, and we look forward to SB 396 being a vessel for that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Broadcast, are there others in support of SB 396?
There is one other caller in support. I'm going to try them again. We tried them earlier and it did not work. Caller with the last three digits, 484. Please press *6 to unmute.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Okay, sorry about that. I'm having technical problems. For the record, this is Maya Holmes from the Culinary Health Fund. It's MAYAHOLMES. We're a nonprofit labor management trust fund that provides health benefits for culinary union workers and their dependents. We're in support of SB 396. We think it's really a sensible and needed path to leverage the state's purchasing power by partnering with other public and private entities in order to secure prescription drugs at a reasonable cost. This is really a critical step forward in order for the state to get a handle on the constantly rising healthcare and prescription drug costs. And a purchasing coalition is needed now more than ever as a result of COVID-19's financial impact on the state economy and our finances. We want to thank Senator Ratty, Senator Doniate, former Senator Kinsella, and the Interim Prescription Drug Cost Study Committee for bringing this bill forward. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Broadcast, is there anyone else on the line for support?
Sir, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Next, we will hear testimony in opposition of SB 396. I'm seeing no, we have one person in the room. Okay, no testimony in the room. I would go ahead and ask Broadcast to check the lines for testimony in opposition to SB 396.
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 396, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you, Broadcast. At this point, I would like to invite anybody wishing to testify neutral on SB 396. Seeing none in the room, I would ask Broadcast to please check the lines for neutral testimony on 396.
To testify in neutral to Senate Bill 396, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you, Broadcast. Appreciate it. Is there anybody on the Zoom to testify in neutral on SB 396? Don't believe there is, but I just want to check and make sure before I go ahead and turn it over to to Senator Doniate. Please go ahead with closing remarks if you have any.
Thank you so much, Chair Peters, and to the committee members for your questions today, and of course to the people who called in to testify on this bill. I'll work with Dr. Slamowitz to address some of the concerns that came up today and see if we can find some solution to that. But you know, the closing remarks that I wanted to mention is that too many times have we heard the horror stories that have occurred from patients and families who have to ration their prescription drugs due to the rising cost associated with them. And, you know, as a son of a diabetic patient myself, every time this happens, my heart yearns for a solution that we can address some of the barriers that stand in the way for patients who simply just wish to get access to their necessary treatment. And, the conversation on drug affordability is long overdue, and I urge you to support SB 396, which can provide entities within our state the leverage needed to finally improve access to affordable and high-quality care. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Senator. And with that, I will close the hearing on SB 396. At this time, we have one more item on our agenda for public comment. I will begin public comment. Seeing none in the room, I will go ahead and ask broadcast. I'm sorry. I forgot to go over our housekeeping items just for those who are listening, maybe online. As a reminder, to provide public comment, you must register online through the legislative website and select your preference for providing public comment either in person or by phone. Registrants preferring to give public comment by phone will receive a phone number, meeting ID, and instructions for joining the meeting. Please remember to clearly state and spell your name and limit your comments to 2 minutes. Staff will be timing each speaker during public comment to ensure everyone is given a fair opportunity to speak. We will limit the overall length of public comment to 20 minutes. Is there anyone on the public broadcast? Is there anyone on the line for public comment at this time?
The public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
I know that there's still a little bit of a delay online, so I would like to give folks maybe a 30 seconds to a minute to see if anyone has just been able to call in online. So if the committee will just be at rest for a quick second while we allow people to call in if they would like. Broadcast, has anybody joined us for public comment at this time?
The public line is still open and working. We have had no callers.
I heard that as no callers. Well, thank you so much. At this time, I would like to ask committee members if there are any other comments before we adjourn. Seeing none, that concludes our meeting for today, and our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 28th. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much, you all.